We are fast approaching the age of the ultimate inversion, the stage where the government is free to do anything it pleases, while the citizens may only act by permission, which is the stage of the darkest periods of human history, the stage of rule by brute force. And this week's opening quote comes from Ayn Rand. Welcome to Surviving the Matrix, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Maxwell Egan. It's a pleasure to be with you once again, and I will be your host for the next hour. And well, I suppose I cannot do this week's show without at least starting off with some mention of the amazing interview that we saw by Prince Andrew. I really don't know what he was thinking when he agreed to that interview, but my Lord, what a revealing interview it was. And if anybody had any doubt at all that Prince Andrew is a full-blown sociopath and a barefaced liar and a sex offender, I think those doubts were quashed by his interview. I mean, how a man could stick his feet so far in his mouth. I mean, he was virtually putting both his legs down his throat. It was unbelievable. And of course it all made perfect sense, and we can sum it all up and put it into a nutshell by saying that it's impossible for Prince Andrew to have ever had sex with Virginia Roberts because he couldn't have been dancing with her and sweating because he doesn't sweat. And just think about that one, folks, and think about the reason he gave. He doesn't sweat because he suffered what he can only describe as an overdose of adrenaline during his time in the Falklands War. What's an overdose of adrenaline? Does that mean you actually were so profoundly terrified at one stage that you sweated all the sweat you could possibly sweat and to never sweat again because you just panicked and you just completely lost your mind because you were so severely panicked, and this caused you to never be able to sweat again? This is what we're led to believe. So, okay, if you want to believe such things, then due to an overdose of adrenaline, Prince Andrew was unable to sweat at the time. Plus the photo taken clearly showing Prince Andrew with his arm around Virginia Roberts' waist can't possibly be real because it was taken upstairs in Ghislaine Maxwell's house, and he's never been upstairs in Ghislaine Maxwell's house, which of course is how he knows it was taken upstairs and is able to recognise that it was taken upstairs because he's never been upstairs. Plus he simply is not one to indulge in displays of public affection. Plus, it's not possible for it to be him because he vividly remembers that 18 years ago he was attending a children's party at a pizza store in Woking on the day, as princes do, even though nobody in Woking has any recollection of him ever being there. And he wouldn't have been out partying with Virginia Roberts anyway because he never parties. And of course, he had to go to New York to spend 4 days in Jeffrey Epstein's apartment because he wasn't very good friends with him and so felt it was the right thing to do to go and see him for 4 days to tell him that he couldn't see him anymore because he has a tendency to be too honourable. And of course, absolutely no regrets at having any friendship with Jeffrey Epstein because of the incredible doorways that were opened up and the incredible amount of people he was able to meet through Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, this is a prince, a member of the royal family housed in Buckingham Palace in England, who's saying that he needs someone to open doors for him so he can meet influential people. I mean, are you serious? And of course, we know what sort of people that were going through Jeffrey Epstein's house, and very likely the type of people the prince was meeting and very keen on meeting would seem to have consisted mainly of young underage women. But no, the prince had to go and see him and hang out for 4 days in a non-party situation simply because it's the right thing to do. To not go and see him would have been the chicken way out, because that, of course, is how you sever ties with convicted sex offenders that you're not very good friends with. You fly halfway around the world to stay at this convicted sex offender's house simply to tell them that you can't see them anymore. And of course, you have no problem staying at this convicted sex offender's house because it's just a convenient place to stay. I think we've pretty well summed that up. And of course, it all makes perfect sense. And I think we should be very grateful to the Prince for coming forward to explain it all to us so eloquently. Now we can put the matter to rest. I mean, obviously, there's no problem at all. I mean, honestly, folks, and you've really got to wonder why or how this even happened. We're told that Queen Elizabeth approved the interview. Perhaps she didn't see it before it went to air, but we're told that she approved it happening and that Prince Andrew just wanted to do it of his own accord. And you really have to wonder why. I mean, what is the motive in all of this? Because it is such a damaging interview. But the thing is that Prince Andrew is a lesser member of the royal family. If you're going to throw anybody to the wolves, then that's likely who it's going to be. And when you look at it, what you'll find is that the palace will portray Prince Andrew as being a black sheep. Oh, he's the one in the family that does this bad stuff. We've been trying to cover up his scandals for years and all this sort of stuff. And you like the way they do that? They always call it a scandal. If you or I did this, it would be a crime. But if it's done by the royal family or done by a politician or done by someone right up there in the public domain, it's called a scandal. Oh no, it's a terrible scandal. And this is the way the media plays things, this play on words. It's not a scandal what Prince Andrew did. It's a crime. Having sex with underage girls, keeping underage girls as sex slaves, and possibly being involved in pedophilia is not a scandal. It's a crime. But this is the way they play it, folks. And they kind of got to a situation where the wheels are falling off the royal family. The whole pedophile ring is being exposed. The lid is opening on the Pandora's box that is the government control system. The fact that this entire world government situation is run by pedophiles, the lid is opening on this box and people are beginning to see it. So they need to hang a few of their own out to dry to try to shift blame and shift attention away from the inner workings of the mechanism. So they'd like you to think that Prince Andrew is the only one in the royal family that gets up to these type of abhorrent activities. And again, this is because he's a lesser member of the royal family, one that we don't really hear too much about. So they want to portray him as the black sheep that gets up to things that nobody else knows about while nobody's looking. When in reality, the most likely scenario is that it is the entire royal family that gets up to these practices, and not only the royal family, but all major politicians and major influencers. I mean, the people that have been implicated in this Jeffrey Epstein case, Alan Dershowitz, and Alan Dershowitz has actually just had Virginia Roberts' lawyer removed from the case. There's been lawsuits going back between these two lawyers. You've got to wonder how he's managed that, when in fact he is someone who is implicated in the case. So there's a little bit of strings being pulled, folks, but these are the type of people that have been implicated in this Jeffrey Epstein investigation. Alan Dershowitz, high-ranking movie executives, politicians, a lot of people visited Jeffrey Epstein's island. And so a lot of people really have been put into the firing line with this, and it really is exposing the reality and opening people up to the concept that the world is actually run by an elite group of pedophiles who network the entire world. And you'll find that all of the main leaders on Earth all went to the same schools. You'll find these schools are all pedophile networked schools. So they're all trained from birth. They're all groomed for the positions that they hold. And this is why we are seeing such a sexualization of children happening at the moment. Why all this transgenderism and all this sort of stuff's coming along. Because they want to sexualize children, because they want to make pedophilia acceptable in the minds of the general public. And over a couple of generations, they'll succeed in doing so if people aren't careful, and we don't nip this in the bud now. You might think, no, that would never be possible, but it is possible to train people to think differently over successive generations. I mean, look at where we are now compared to where we were in the 1950s. The moral standards of society have virtually disappeared, so you've got to wonder where we're going to be in another 50 years, if this is not recognised and nipped in the bud now. So there's a huge mind control program going on, folks, and it's worldwide. It's a worldwide situation. The entire world is being homogenized, and we've been trained to think in certain ways. I mean, public opinion is so easily molded. It really is. I mean, just look at it. Look at the subtle public opinion molding that's happening in the United States at the moment while this impeachment is going on. And the impeachment, this is such a joke, folks. I mean, Trump hasn't done anything worthy of impeachment. Look at what some of the previous presidents have done. They didn't get impeached. George W. Bush bombed Iraq for no reason whatsoever, lied through his teeth, caused the entire war of terror, and carried out the 9/11 attacks on his watch as well. He didn't get impeached. And all this is happening right now while this whole Epstein cases going on, and whenever they refer to Epstein, whenever they talk about it on the US news, you'll find that they always put that picture up there that shows Donald and Melania Trump in the company of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. It's very interesting, folks, and of course it's because of the impeachment and it's because of the upcoming election. But they never show you the other photos. They never show you photos of Bill Clinton with Jeffrey Epstein. They never show the photo of Ghislaine Maxwell actually being present at Bill Clinton's daughter's wedding. That's how close they were with this family. Oh no, they don't want to show you that because they don't want any chance that the Democrats might lose the election. They don't want the Republicans getting back in the United States. And folks, the last thing you want to have in the United States is the Democrats. You don't want these people to get back into power. If the Democrats get back into power, say goodbye to the United States. You'll be at war before you know it, and the whole place will be Chinese before the end of the decade. But it's very interesting the way they do this, folks, the subtle mind control that they even put in the media and just train people what to think. Train people to associate Donald Trump with Jeffrey Epstein, even though he's probably the one person who actually did sever his ties with Jeffrey Epstein a decade or so ago when he said he did. Whereas everybody else who's saying they did obviously didn't sever their ties. They were all fully involved. So it's an interesting play the way the media is doing this. Subtle mind control, folks. It's on so many levels throughout our society. Subtle mind control and moulding public opinion is how they get away with everything, folks. It's how they're getting away with continuing the rollout of 5G here in Australia. You know, there's been so many places all around the world that have banned 5G. Brussels has fully banned 5G. But no, Australia's saying, no, we're going to keep rolling it out because it's just conspiracy theorists who are saying that it's damaging for your health. And they're naturally associating people who are speaking out against 5G with anti-vaxxers and, guess what, flat earthers. There it is, folks. I told you the flat earth movement was going to infect all forms of activism that we're doing. It was going to infect everything, and people were going to be able to associate all forms of activism with the belief that the earth is flat. I mentioned this was going to happen 4 or 5 years ago. I said this is what was going to happen, and that's what's been done, folks. There's been an enormous effort to cross-pollinate information and for all genuine research and all genuine activism to be associated with the belief that the earth is flat. And now we are seeing this being turned back and thrown in our face with things such as the 5G activism that's happening, which again is being used to push the concept into the minds of the public that anybody who thinks 5G is bad for you probably also believes the earth is flat. This, of course, gets the general public to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and we're back in the same schmozzle of infighting and misdirection that we have been in for so long. Divide and conquer is the motto, folks, and the easiest way to do this is by moulding public opinion and by associating completely unrelated topics with each other so that it causes people to simply throw the whole lot away as one big major conspiracy theory. It's the same as the way they did with JFK. You know, you start saying, well, if you believe John F. Kennedy was killed by the government, then you must believe that they faked the moon landing as well. It's the way they do all of this stuff, folks. I mean, actually, I think that a lot of people actually started to figure out that the moon landing was fake, and so they figured that they couldn't continue using that, so they replaced it with the flat earth movement. Whereas now, anybody who thinks 5G is bad for you also believes the earth is flat. And I know there's going to be a lot of flat earthers out there who think, oh no, there he goes attacking the flat earth movement again. And I'm not attacking the flat earth movement. What I'm saying is that the flat earth movement was used to cross-pollinate information to associate all genuine research and all genuine on-the-ground hands-on activism with the belief the earth is flat, and that this is going to be used to sway public opinion and ultimately introduce internet censorship. And this is something that I said they were going to do back in 2014 when the flat earth movement first came to prominence, and now we are seeing the fruit of that unfolding right now. And no, that isn't an attack against anybody. It's simply being observant and noticing how things are unfolding. You know, even when people started focusing on the health aspects of 5G, and I said that, you know, if people make health the main issue, what's going to happen is that when they turn 5G on and everyone just suddenly doesn't get sick, everyone's going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and the health issues are only really part of it. What it's really about is the smart system and the surveillance grid that goes with it And again, this is all being used and brought into it. This is all they're talking about is the health issues. No one's talking about the surveillance. No one's talking about the IoT. The whole focus has been co-opted and misdirected into a completely different direction to what it's really all about. You know, the whole situation is very predictable, folks, if you look at it in the right way. And incidentally, last week I mentioned the possibility that the fires were being used, the fires here in Australia were being used to clear the way for the new high-speed rail line, the proposed high-speed rail line. It was just announced a couple of days ago by ScoMo that, yes, they are putting in the high-speed rail. And look, again, not all the fires are on the railway line. Don't get me wrong with this. I mean, I'm not saying that every fire is where the railway line is going to go. But certainly where a lot of the fires are is the path of the new rail line. And I do find it interesting that ScoMo has just announced that it's going to be done straight after we've seen these fires. And there's been so much stuff happening with these fires, folks. So many reports coming out about how funding has been pulled from firefighters. Whole firefighting teams have been laid off. A couple of weeks ago, a few weeks before the fires broke out, they brought in new regulations whereby volunteer firefighters had to have blue cards saying they've been checked up and can deal with children before they can be a volunteer firefighter. I mean, what that's about, folks, this is simply a way of getting these people out of the picture so that we don't have these volunteer firefighters. You know, and all of this stuff was put in place, all of the groundwork was done to make sure that this firestorm was going to be catastrophic. And it's all been done deliberately by the government. So a lot of people are picking up on that, I think, and that's good to see as well. I mean, this government in this country has quite literally sold the people down the river, folks. They've really sold us out. Even all of the land deals they've made with China and all the stuff they've sold to China. But the good part about it is that none of it actually really matters because the entire Australian government is invalid anyway, which means that every land deal they've made with China is actually invalid as well because the criminals masquerading as politicians in this country are not a legitimate Australian government. Scott Morrison is not a legitimate Prime Minister, because the office that he holds is actually standing in a state of treason because of some of the things the politicians have done in this country. And again, I do suggest you go and look at the work of Wayne Glue and a lot of the people that have been out exposing what's going on in this country. You know, it's just getting the information out to people. We've got to find a way of doing that. Because if enough people in Australia were to get this information, were to act on this information, we can actually make a real difference in this country. Because this whole government's invalid, folks. You don't have to do anything they say. You don't have to pay your taxes to them. You don't even have to do what the police say in this country, because the police in Australia are not Australian police force. They are foreign combatants on Australian soil. You know, and the only reason we do what they say is because we have no unity in the people. I mean, of course, you've got to do what they say if you're by yourself because they'll kick the hell out of you if you don't. But if we had some unity in this country and people actually became aware of the situation in this country, then we could change things. All it would take would be for people to stand up. Because the truth of the matter is that this entire system is invalid. Even under its own law, it's invalid. It's a corporate system, the whole thing. It's not a legitimate government. All the state police in Australia work for the District of Columbia. They're all registered as non-organisations with Dun & Bradstreet in the District of Columbia. So you don't have to do what any of these people say. And all of the rules that the politicians have put in place ever since Bob Hawke passed the Fraudulent Australia Act have been invalid. Not one single piece of legislation that they've put in place since Bob Hawke was Prime Minister has any legal value whatsoever. It all simply exists and controls us due to people's willingness to comply with it. And, you know, they only really do this because of the terrorism that is inflicted upon them by the thugs in black Kevlar masquerading as police, who are basically domestic terrorists and debt collectors performing their duties for the criminal cabal masquerading as government. Now, people do what they're told because they live in a state of fear. But the reality of the situation in Australia, folks, is that we can take this country back any time we choose to stand up and call it, because this entire government is in treason. They're all invalid. Every politician in this country, anybody who's been sworn into office who thinks they're actually part of a government, is actually part of a criminal organisation. Every one of these people can be put in jail under their own law. That's a good thing. All it will require is for the people of Apathalia to grow a little bit of backbone and stand up and call things out for what they are. And I'm really hoping to see that, because the wheels really do appear to be falling off this entire mechanism, and not just here in Australia, but all around the world. You know, the Yellow Vest movement in France has made huge headway, and the protests in Hong Kong, such incredibly coordinated protests in Hong Kong. And people really need to look into what's going on in Hong Kong, folks. Sure, there's probably a certain amount of controlled aspect in there, but the protesters in Hong Kong are not just these violent kids and just bad people doing bad things. These people are genuinely fighting for their freedom because they are very concerned at being associated with China and coming under Chinese rule. And if you think that's a good thing and you support Chinese rule and think China have really got everything organised and it's a great place to be, go and look at the social crediting system in China and go and look at what they're doing to Muslims in China. And this is very, very telling, folks. And these are peaceful Muslims. I mean, there's a whole concept out there that all Muslims are terrorists. This is just completely absurd. It's like thinking all Christians are terrorists or all Dutch people wear wooden shoes. I mean, you know, it's just racist thinking. It's like thinking all black people eat watermelons. I mean, it's the same thing, folks. It's racist thinking. Yeah, and the detention centers that China has set up for Muslims in China, these reorientation centers, are absolutely disgraceful. They are disgusting by anybody's standards. And the people that are putting these centers in place and supporting them, a government that is putting this in place for any type of people is a government that needs to be taken out the back and shot, basically. These people are non-human. They're not doing anything to help anybody, and neither are the order followers who are supporting the government and following orders. These people are just brain-dead programmed fools. And when you look at the situation in China, it is no wonder that the people in Hong Kong are protesting the way they are and to the degree that they are. But the protests are so well organised that I think people all around the world should be paying very close attention to what is going on in Hong Kong, because I think these are some methods that we may well want to incorporate in our own countries when push comes to shove. When our governments do become open police states the way they are going, and that is happening here in Australia. Don't think that it isn't, because it is. When it gets to the point that it is the government against the people and you've got these brain-dead thugs in black Kevlar acting as terrorists and fighting against the people, we may very well need to use some of the methods that are being incorporated in Hong Kong just for our own security and our own safety. And I think it's a good thing for people to be paying attention to this. But the thing is, these type of protests are happening all around the world. That's the important thing. To see that there's so many people in so many nations now that have had enough. They're seeing what's really going on here. They're seeing that all these governments are working together, that it's one big worldwide network. It's all pointing towards the one agenda. They're all pedophiles. They're all in this big club, and nothing that they're doing is anything that is beneficial for humankind. A lot of people are beginning to see this, and a lot of people are beginning to want to make a difference in some way anyway, and that's a good thing. I've had a lot of people sending me ideas as well. I want to try to discuss some of these on the show at some stage as well. A lot of plans they've got, little activist groups they've got going. Because I wonder what to support. I wonder what groups to support anymore, because I find it very difficult to trust anybody anymore. And every time I have tried to support anything, it usually gets thrown back at me anyway. But, I'll look at these things anyway and I'll see what I can do to help get the word out about some of these action groups that are happening. I think a lot of the problem is that too many people, they form these ideas in their heads and they try to present these plans of what the new system should be or what the new world should look like. And, it's very difficult to present these types of things to people and have anybody agree to go along with it or work towards this goal because they're unsure of what the end result will be. And many people are in fear that everything will be co-opted and it'll just lead back to the slavery system, only worse than what we've got. And what I find with a lot of this, and as I've said so many times, the problem is people's need to even have to formulate a new plan or a new system, and people's belief that they need someone to do that for them. They don't understand that the only thing that holds this system up is our tolerance of wrong behaviour. It's our willingness to step outside our moral compass and abide by legislation which doesn't benefit humanity. That's the problem. And in recognising that, it becomes apparent that it doesn't matter what sort of system anybody presents to us, because if we don't change our moral compass, we're just going to end up back where we are. But if we did just change that moral compass and just stop complying with legislation which causes us to step outside our moral compass, then this system couldn't function. It couldn't work. We don't need to have a protest. We don't need to structure any type of new system. We don't need any type of movement with a leader or any type of thing like that at all. All we really need to do is for people to reconnect with what it means to be human and treat people as they would be treated themselves, in Lakesh. That's how we change the world. And that's why it becomes difficult to promote so many of the plans that people send to me. And I do get a lot of people sending me stuff saying, Max, please look at this. This is my idea for how the new world should be structured. And I find it very difficult to, look at them and promote them because we don't really need to structure a new world. We don't really need to structure a new system. What we need to do is restructure ourselves. Restructure what's in our hearts. We need to reorient our moral compass, because when we do that, the whole world changes, and we don't need any type of new system for that to happen. We don't need any type of movement that people need to focus on or strive to move towards and get other people to go along with it. All we need to do is become good people, and that will change everything, because this whole system is designed to make sure we are not good people. Even if we want to be good people, we're not able to do good things because of the cost involved in doing so and the penalty involved in stepping outside of the lines to help another person. I hope people can understand that and see what I'm saying. And many people who do send me these ideas, I really appreciate the ideas you send me, and I really appreciate the effort that you're going to help to make a difference. I just hope you can understand my perspective and how I'm looking at things. And even when you look at the history of me, since I've been on the air like these 13 years on the radio show, every time anybody sent me any type of idea for any type of restructuring of anything, it's usually backfired. The trolls come out. None of these things work because ultimately people simply aren't prepared to make changes. People aren't prepared to really do anything positive or proactive, generally speaking, to change the world. They want the world to change, but they're not prepared to change themselves. They just want to get the newsletter to be told the world has changed, and it's safe for them to go outside now. But at the same time, when that's changed, they don't expect their lives to change in any way. People say, I want all the corruption to go, but I'll still get up and I'll work my job and I'll do the things that I'm doing and I'll pay my taxes and I'll do all this stuff. What do they expect to happen? If we do change the world and suddenly all the corruption's gone, do they expect that their life is not going to change in some way? It's a weird thing. It's a really weird thing. Many people seem to be terrified of change. And change is what we need, but all you really need to do, as I keep saying, is change what's inside you. Once you change your heart, then the world around you changes. That's just the way it works. But people, again, all this is co-opted into this whole new age movement of, okay, I'll change my heart. I'll sit there in meditation, then I'll open my eyes and the world will be different. Well, no, you actually have to apply all of this stuff that you're learning on the inside to the 3D world you live in. You've got to apply it to reality, folks. If you don't apply it to reality, it doesn't really mean anything. Do all the inner work you want, but if you don't apply it to the world you live in, then what's the point? It's like with all this information that people gather, with the truth movement, the resistance, whatever you want to call it, how much information do people want? How much information do they need before they know the world is completely corrupt and it's run by criminals, before they get to do something with this information and apply it to the world they live in? How can you know all this stuff that you know and continue just living your life the way you are, going to work, paying your taxes, doing all these things? People who are heavily involved in the truth movement or consume a lot of this information and listen to a lot of the speakers, such as myself. When you get this information, and sure, I know a lot of people are caught up in loops where they're on the treadmill and they don't know how to get off. But when you get this information, what did you think was going to happen? Do you think that there's a time that you might actually have to apply it to the world you live in? And really there is, folks, and that time is now. And all you've really got to do is share information and be a positive person to be around. Lead by example in all the things that you do. But as also I've said quite often in the past, one of the best things you can do, you've got to change your moral compass, absolutely, but one of the best things you can do with the information that you've got now is to provide a safety net for people who are waking up through these very, very difficult times, and they're going to get more difficult. And those of us who are awake, who have taken the certain steps needed to ensure our own survival, at least we've got survival skills, we've got a grab bag, we know we can at least get through this. We're not going to be too surprised when the world turns pear-shaped. At least we can offer some type of safety net to those people who are freaking out at what's happening. I mean, it's like the fires here in Australia, folks, with all this stuff happening. A lot of people are really freaking out, saying they've never seen anything like this. And me personally, well, I've been kind of expecting this to happen. We've been watching it happen all around the world, and I've just been waiting for it to come here, and here it is, and I'm not surprised at all. And that is kind of beneficial in many ways. So, I think that safety net is important, and I think that is really a major part of being a member of the resistance. It's a major responsibility we have. We do have a real responsibility for our fellow human beings, folks, through what is going to be some very, very difficult times ahead. But I think we have reached break time here, folks, so I'll leave it there for now, and we'll go and have a break. Thank you for joining me on the air today. It's always a pleasure to have your company, and I'll be back to speak to you again in a few minutes. Don't go away, because there's plenty more to come. And welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. So we really are entering towards the time of the ultimate inversion, folks, the time where everything is backwards. As I said, even the promotion of pedophilia, the acceptance of pedophilia, the sexualization of children, this is very alien to our society. This is something that we've never seen before in our society, but it's now becoming acceptable. And as I said earlier, if you think that it isn't becoming acceptable and it would never be acceptable, well, you've just got to look at what's happening to kids now. Look at the transgenderization and what's happening to children at school now, and imagine what it will be like once these children grow up through school and become parents of their own. What will be being taught to the children by that stage? We're talking 20, 30 years down the track. I mean, the human race will be virtually unrecognizable from what it should be at that point. And what is this? Is this progression? Do you think that someone's being a prude by not accepting this type of over-sexualization of humanity? Do you think that's what life is all about? Is that what we're here for? We're just here for sex? Is that the whole reason to exist? I mean, because that's the way it seems to be going. Everything's becoming over-sexualized, and through it the genders are becoming more and more disconnected from each other, and people are basically becoming more disconnected from everybody anyway through the rise of smart technology. We're becoming more connected online, but we're becoming more disconnected in the real world. Disconnected from everything, disconnected from everyday activities, disconnected from life skills, disconnected from everyday services as well. I've seen talk that landlines will soon be disappearing because we don't need landlines anymore because we've got wireless communication, and there's new VoIP phones being promoted by people. A new ad I saw, these VoIP phones taking Australia by storm, blah, blah, blah. The way they advertise it, tell you it's a great thing. It's taking Australia by storm. Everybody's got one, so you should get one too. And it's basically a way of having a landline in your house. Well, it looks like a landline, but really it's hooked up to the internet on VoIP, so you don't actually need a landline. And this is a way of disconnecting people and locking people out. You imagine when the smart system comes fully online and it's all down to social crediting, what happens when you actually get locked out due to your social credit points? Who are you going to call? And how are you going to call them? If you're locked out of all wireless services and only wireless services exist, then who are you going to call? And how are you going to call them? That's the thing, folks. And in a state of emergency, when you get a situation where there's a power outage or something, landlines have voltage going through the phone line. You can always pick up a landline and you can call someone during a power outage. But if it's a VoIP phone and the power goes out, well, you simply can't call anybody. You're stuck. That's it. No contact, completely disconnected. And with social crediting, it doesn't really have to be a power outage. They can just disconnect you at any time. And you know what it's like when you get disconnected. You know what it's like when the internet goes down, you can't contact someone to get it fixed, or the power goes out or whatever. You know how frustrating it is. What about when that happens and there's no one you can call, no one you can ask, no appeal process for you? You're simply a marked individual. And you know that as soon as you are blacklisted from social services or blacklisted from essential services, as soon as you walk outside, someone's going to spot you somewhere. Your social credit point's going to come up as a little red spot or whatever. The police with their facial recognition glasses will be able to pick you out of a crowd and just take you away and put you into one of their reorientation centres. This is the way they've done it in China with the Muslim reorientation centres that they put there. They're telling people, like, there's students that are arriving home in China from overseas, students that have been away studying. They come back to China, they find their whole family's disappeared, and there's nothing they can do. All they're able to do is receive information from the authorities who are there to meet them when they arrive home because their family's disappeared, and they realise that these students, when they arrive home, are going to be concerned that their families have disappeared. So they meet them at the airports, they take them into an office, and they explain to them that their families have become infected with Muslim extremism, whether they have or not. They just say that's what's wrong with them, and that they're in a detention centre. They're being retrained, and they're not prisoners, but they're not able to leave. And the more the students try to find out anything about their parents, they just get told in stronger terms, in a progressively firmer manner, that their parents have been detained and they're being reoriented and they're not prisoners, but they can't leave. And then they're informed that their actions in the office today could determine the length of their family's stay in the reorientation centre. So you better behave yourself while you're here, and you better agree with us, and you better not express too much remorse or concern, because then we might think that you are infected by Muslim extremism as well, and you can go off and join your family. That's the sort of situation that they've got in China, folks, and that's the sort of a situation that they would like to introduce here as well. Do not think outside the box, and if you do think outside the box, you will be taken for reorientation. That's the way they want to take it, folks. That's what we're heading to, and that's why it is so important for people to stand up. And that's why there's been such a misdirection with this whole 5G thing as well. I've been saying for a long time that people need to be very careful about promoting the health concerns of 5G and focusing on that and making that a focal point, because we don't know about a lot of the health stuff. A lot of the stuff that's coming out, I think, is sort of fear-mongering. I think that they're taking it to the extreme. I don't think it's going to be any type of extinction event or any type of 5G apocalypse or anything like that. I think what it's about mainly is surveillance. What it's about is the IoT. What it's about is social crediting and ultimate control over human society. That's what it's about, folks. It's not really about health stuff at all. That's a smokescreen to get people concerned and focusing on something which isn't going to happen, so they miss what is actually happening below the surface. And this is something that I've been saying for a while now, and we're starting to see this manifest as well. And we're starting to see the media pick up on this, and we're starting to see that our PANs are here in Australia and stuff is focusing on the health concerns, saying, no, these are all blown out of proportion. These are conspiracy theorists. These people are as bad as anti-vaxxers and flat earthers, is what they're saying. And the article that they put out stating that, folks, they put that same line in there about associating 5G protesters with anti-vaxxers and flat earthers. They put it in the article 3 or 4 times. They just kept repeating that line just to get it into the public mind. So they're really pushing this, folks. So it's not really about the health aspects as much as it is about the surveillance. This is something that I said way back in the beginning. I put out a video back in 2016, 2017, called 5G, the elephant in your living room. And I mentioned in that video that what this is about is surveillance. What this is about is the introduction of a smart prison system. And it's imperative that people pay attention to this. It really is. Because once it's in place, folks, there's going to be no turning back. It's going to be something that's going to be almost impossible for us to escape from. But the thing is, and even looking at that, I think there's a higher aspect to that as well. And as I've said previously on the show, I think a lot of what we're seeing here is data collection. I think that they do this at the end of each cycle, and they want to find out what the human condition is. They sort of correlate all the information, gather all the information, get what everybody's thinking, get what the current state of human consciousness is, and then cull the population and move on to the next cycle. And I think they've done this time and time again. And I think the Earth is very likely getting less and less able to support life during this process, which is why we see things such as the Georgia Guidestones, which are there for the next cycle, so they know that's as far as they're able to allow the population to rise. Anything above that is not going to be manageable. I think that this is all very contrived and very predictable, folks, and I think that there's people on the inner circles of things that know exactly what's going on. And I also think that's why we're seeing so much stuff being exposed at the moment. The externalization of the hierarchy. They want us to know what's going on, not just so we become willing participants in it, but just so we've got all of this theatre to distract us from what is going on a macro level, what is going on universally, what is going on regarding this Earth as a whole and the direction that life is taking. The more I've been looking into these solar minimums and things, the more I'm seeing this is a very real possibility. It certainly explains a lot of stuff that we're finding, such as the mud floods, such as the repopulation of the world with children, such as the many things that we're finding now. We've long since figured out now, folks, that history's wrong. It's a complete lie. It's been fabricated, and there's so much evidence of this that, I'm just going to make that statement and say that and not even bother to provide anything in this YouTube clip for those watching it on YouTube anyway. I'm going to get back into this in the next few shows anyway, possibly even next week. I want to get back into history. There's so much I want to share. There's been so much new information coming out, and I think it's relevant. I think it's relevant to understand the situation that we're in and where we're going. I think it's relevant in helping understand and lay to rest some of the great mysteries that we've got. When you start factoring in the reality that history's wrong, they're not really such mysteries at all. And when you start factoring in the possibility of these solar minimums being a reality and these cyclic cataclysms being a reality, everything falls into place. So I think this is a reality, folks. And the more I look at it, the more I see explanations for why we are seeing so much chaos in the world at the moment. What the quickening is all about. We hear about the quickening. What is the quickening? Well, it's when everything speeds up, and people have assumed this to mean time speeding up, but really it's just activity. It's like an affront of the senses. It's like sensual input is speeding up. We've got so much information coming in from all avenues at the moment, all directions. It's just streaming into our consciousness everywhere we look. And with so much information streaming, it becomes very difficult to focus on anything, any aspect of it, any real aspect of it, because there's just so much coming in. This is why people's attention spans have been shortened so much. And people have such short attention spans now, they want a constant stream of information coming in. They want new stuff all the time. So they're not really stepping back and looking at things as a whole, and they're not really observing things on a macro level. They don't have time to observe them. To many people, it's just boring. They don't want to set aside any time to just sit in contemplation anymore and just observe. Look at reality for what it is, step back from reality, put it on a macro level and simply observe, contemplate, see what makes sense and what doesn't. A lot of people don't do this anymore. They just would rather be doing other things. They'd rather be clicking on their smartphones and getting likes on Instagram and Snapchat and posting photos of themselves, because really that's what life's about, isn't it? We've been so disconnected and misdirected, folks. It really is quite scary when you step back and look at it. It is, you've got to wonder what it's going to take for the human race to wake up. Do we just have to let it continue careering off the cliff the way it's going and wait till the whole thing implodes and see what rises from the rubble? That was once an option for many people. A lot of people thought, well, this is the only way we're actually going to heal anything. You should just let it all go to its natural conclusion and then implode and hope that a phoenix rises from the ashes. But when you start factoring in the reality of these cyclic cataclysms and cyclic ice ages, solar minimums, all of this sort of stuff, well, it puts a whole different slant on things. It really does. Because what sort of a phoenix will be rising from these ashes? If the whole world freezes over, or much of the world freezes over, then what's it going to be from that point? How do we build a new system from that point? Is that really what's going to happen? And if you factor in the possibility that there's people that actually know this, they know what's going on, and that's what the underground bases are for, and that there's a whole society living underground in these bases that are just simply going to come up and repopulate the Earth after the next solar minimum. Well, like I said, folks, it really does put a completely different slant on things, and it becomes very sobering, and when you look at this, if you factor this in as being a possibility, well, it really does cause you to question how you're living your life and what meaning there is in your life. Some of the stuff that we do in our lives, the goals that we have, the houses that we build, all of this sort of stuff. Look at the houses that we build in this society, folks. They're all temporary accommodation. Why don't we build anything that's made to last? Any house that you build, if you spent $1 million building up your home, do you really think that this home is going to be there for future generations? Most modern homes are made of gyprock and tile and all of this sort of stuff, which is just going to deteriorate. It's not going to last. None of these homes are built to actually be handed down for generations. They're just all temporary accommodation, made to be pulled down later on. And we often factor this in when we're building stuff. We factor stuff in when we build it so that it's easy to demolish later. What's that all about? Why don't we just build something that's worthwhile and make it last so it can be used again? Oh, that's right, the economy. We've got to support the economy. We've got to keep turning it over. We've got to keep pulling resources from the earth, turning it into piles of rubbish, and pulling more resources from the earth and turning it into piles of stuff, which is eventually going to turn into piles of rubbish because it's all just temporary stuff that we build because we've got to keep turning the economy over. It's something I've also said many times before, folks. If you really want to look at the economic model and our need to make sure we have strong economies and support the economy all the time, all the economy is designed to do is turn the entire earth into a rubbish tip. It's ridiculous. And look at our society, folks. What a joke, really. This society that supports the economic model as being the god of its society, the be-all and end-all of everything. What does that lead to? We just build all this stuff that we don't really want or don't really need, and then later we tear it down because that's the way it goes, so we can build it again, and that's what we do. We just build it up and pull it down and build it up and pull it down, and people are getting progressively more and more stupid along the way. It's like the Lego movie. Did you ever see the Lego movie? That was a total truth bomb in a child's movie when that movie came out. Here was this society, a whole bunch of people running around on the treadmill, building stuff up and smashing it all down again just so they could rebuild it again. No one could do anything without instructions. Everybody had to be told how to do everything. And while they're working, doing all this completely meaningless activity, they're singing songs saying everything is awesome because that's what they're programmed to think. It was such a classic truth bomb in that movie, and just that itself is such a perfect description of what our society is. We just build stuff up, knock it down, rebuild it, and everyone's running around saying how awesome everything is while they're actually doing nothing and getting nowhere except running on the treadmill. And what it is, folks, is a people farm. We're all just goods and chattels, and we're all just working on this treadmill, running mining operations for this hidden hand, which is strip mining this earth. And the earth is being strip mined, folks, I'm convinced. Where's all this stuff going that we pull out of the earth? And this is a question that I posed back in a film that I put out back in 2010 called The Awakening. I said, why is the earth being strip mined, and where is all of this stuff going? It's a people farm, folks. Well, that's what the evidence says anyway. The evidence suggests it's a people farm, and we're simply being used to run mining operations. We're just goods and chattels. I say that sometimes when people ask how it works. It's all to do with the birth certificate and trading your birth certificate. When you're born, you're registered, you're given a stock number, and you are traded on the stocks and indexes exchange. And when you die, your birth certificate, your net worth will be a certain amount, and whoever was managing that particular farm gets that money, gets that cut. That's the way it works. You can go and look into maritime admiralty law and all of this sort of stuff and see how it works. What you got to understand, folks, is there's one set of rules that are put there for the people, and there's another set of rules that are put there for the ruling class. And they don't really play by any rules at all, as we've just seen with Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew's big mistake was that he got caught. That's the only mistake that he really made. All the rest do it, and that's the way he let the family down when he said, I let the side down. Yes, because you got caught, because now the spotlight possibly will get turned on them as well, which is why they're so desperate to turn the spotlight onto Prince Andrew alone, because they don't want to realise how systemic this corruption is, but it is absolutely corrupt, folks. We're living in a people farm. And the only way we're ever going to escape and emancipate ourselves from this people farm is to realize what we're doing, realize that most of the stuff we're doing is completely meaningless. It doesn't have anything to do with being human. All we're doing is running on the treadmill, making money for somebody else. That's what we're doing. And we need to put all of this stuff down we've got with each other and unite as one species on this earth and stand up to reclaim our world while we still have a world to reclaim. And I firmly believe we can do this without violence. We may need counter-violence to repel the ruling hand that wants to believe that they still can rule us. But ultimately, folks, there is so many more of us than there are of them that I don't even think we need to do that. Once we stop complying, they won't have a choice. They'll just simply have to go away and stop trying to control us. The question is, of course, the wild card of the solar minimums. But, perhaps if we were even aware of these things, perhaps if there was some general awareness of the cyclic nature of this world and the cyclic nature of civilization, perhaps we would do things differently. Perhaps we would get some unified effort to be able to make a difference, to be able to survive these events. Perhaps we used to do that already. That's what all these underground cities are doing there. And there are underground cities all over the place, folks. The recently discovered underground city in Turkey is very revealing when you look at that. I'll have to do a show on that at some stage. I've really got to discuss that at some point on this radio show, but there's just so much stuff that I want to talk about and so much stuff I want to cover. It's difficult to get anything done sometimes because I've got too much on the plate. That's the way it goes, but I do intend to bring you some more stuff on history soon. But folks, we are getting to that time again where I think we have pretty well reached the end of the show, so I better not get into any more topics now and just leave it where it is. As I've mentioned before, I'm going to be speaking on the Gold Coast here in Australia, and it's very rare for me to do any talks in Australia. This is the only one that I have planned for the foreseeable future, so if you are in Australia and you'd like to come to this talk, do come along. It's on the 14th of December. I said 14th of February last show. I got that wrong. It's the 14th of December. It's about 3 or 4 weeks from now, and it's going to be held at Varsity Lakes. If you go to my website, you'll find a banner on my website that will take you to Eventbrite. You can go and purchase yourself a ticket. It's pretty cheap, and it's a whole day event, folks. So I'm going to be speaking from about 10 o'clock in the morning until about 6 o'clock at night. So it's quite a long day. So if you have ever wanted to come to listen to one of the talks or get some inside information, now's the time to do it. Again, that's going to be on the Gold Coast on the 14th of December. And it's limited seating too, folks. It only holds about 100 people or 120 people. So I do urge you, if you want to come along, I do urge you to go and get your ticket early. Following that, I'm going to be speaking at Acapulco in Mexico in February. That's around about the 14th to the 17th of February. If you go to my website, thecrowhouse.com, you'll find a banner to that on my website. And if you click that banner and go in through that entry point, you'll get yourself a 10% discount on the ticket. Or you can simply use the coupon MAXIGAN. That's one word, MAXIGAN. You can use that on the Acapulco website and you'll get yourself a discount on that ticket as well. Following that, I'm very likely to be speaking at a gig in LA that I still have to organise. There's a possibility of another gig called the Zen Awakening gig, which will be happening somewhere in the United States as well, I believe in April. And I'll very likely be speaking at AV11 in the UK in May. I haven't spoken to Ian Crane yet, but I'll get onto him soon and I'll confirm that for you. And these are the only gigs that I have planned for 2020. And 2020 is going to be the last year that I do any touring for a while. I really do want to get into some activism here on the ground. There's a lot to take care of here where I live, and I want to pay some attention to that. Plus, I'm just kind of over the travel. But that is it for me, folks. I'm completely out of time. Thank you to all the people who send me so many kind emails. I have got on top of a lot of emails, so hopefully if you're out there waiting for a response, hopefully you've got one. And if not, well, I'm still getting to yours, and I will get to it eventually, don't fear. And thank you to all the people who support me on Patreon. And I'd like to put out a special thanks to the people who answered the call to give me a little bit of extra funding this month. I really do appreciate those who signed up, even if you just signed up for 1 month. I cannot thank you enough for that because it is the only thing that keeps this show on the air. And I think we are heading for some very, very important times. I'd like to keep broadcasting as long as I am able to. As long as YouTube keeps letting me broadcast as well. I mean, when YouTube goes down, at least I will still be here broadcasting on the American Voice Radio, and I'll still be posting stuff to BitChute, so we'll just see how it goes with the whole new YouTube restrictions and guidelines that they're bringing in. But that is it for me, folks. I'll look forward to speaking to you again next week. Please take very good care. Until then, in Lakesh.